Wuthering Waves 2.7 is just a couple days away, and even though the version itself feels a little underwhelming, we might actually be getting the single best story in the entire Renaissance arc. I mean, we're finally heading into the journey in paradise. We're about to see that big Avengers Assemble moment with everyone from the Renaissance storyline. There's going to be a war, an all-out battle against the Thenodian, this recurring enemy that's been a thorn in our side since the very beginning of the arc. So yeah, story-wise, 2.7 is shaping out to be something special. And with that in mind, I ask you all to share your predictions. What you think will happen in this story? Will we win this battle? Who's going to survive? Who might fall? And I got a bunch of really interesting responses. So in this video, we're going to go through them together and see just how likely some of these theories really are. So if you're just kind of content, make sure to like the video and tell me your own predictions in the comments below. Who do you think will win this battle? Who do you think will lose? How do you think the entire story will go? And of course, subscribe and you can share on any of my future videos. Alright, let's get into it. So before we start, let's lay some groundwork. We're not going to go through every single prediction. We'd be here all day if we did. Instead, we're only going to cover a few because honestly, a lot of the comments and predictions that were submitted are either just different versions of the same ideas or not really predictions at all. More like people expressing how much they love and enjoy the game. And listen, that is perfectly fine. But for this video, we're only focusing on the distinct predictions, the one that actually stand out from the rest. With all that being said, the first prediction comes from Zach Riley 8180, who says, I think two things might happen. Galbarina kills CRAZIER, or Leviathan finally corrupts her and forces Rover to kill her. Now this prediction is actually very interesting because the core idea here is that CRAZIER will not survive version 2.7, and honestly, the theory of CRAZIER's death has been floating around the Wuthering Waves community for quite some time. And the game even sort of supports this because if you remember the 2.5 story, it was revealed that CRAZIER unknowingly absorbed frequencies around her, and that was already concerning. But what made it worse was the fact that this information was gotten due to her absorbing fake frequencies from a fake world, but even those were strong enough to visibly affect her. So if that's what happens with fake frequencies, imagine what could happen when she's exposed to the real thing in an all-out war. The idea of her losing control or maybe being corrupted and forcing either Galbarina or the Rover to put her down honestly feels like a very real possibility going into 2.7. But will CRAZIER actually die in this story? Well, honestly, if she does end up becoming an antagonist, that would spell real trouble for the entire cast because CRAZIER is easily one of the strongest characters in the game. Seeing her go all out against the good guys would be epic. But here's the thing, I don't think the game is going to kill her off because for one, Wuthering Waves has never actually killed a character. Yes, we've seen close calls before, like with Folova, but even then, the game stops short of going all the way. And that can be seen in the fact that she plays a big role in the story that we're entering in 2.7. And then there's also the business side of it. CRAZIER is a massive fan favorite, possibly one of the most sold characters in the game, and as much as Crow wants to tell a great story, they still have to think about what keeps players invested. So yeah, as much as a death would shake things up, I don't see them taking that route. However, I would not be surprised at all if CRAZIER doesn't make it out of the story in one piece. Because even if I'm not confident that Wuthering Waves would outright kill her, I can't see her coming out of 2.7 the same way she went in. She might end up getting the Folova treatment, not quite dead, but not quite alive either. Maybe that kind of state is needed to completely seal the Thenodian, or maybe there's another twist that involves her sacrifice. Either way, I just can't picture everyone, especially CRAZIER, walking away from this unscathed. Something has to give in this story. The next prediction comes from Ragstar22, who says, Rover says it's Wuthering time as they beat Leviathan in the final battle.
It's Morbin time.
This is one of those meme predictions, but the funny thing is, I can actually see some version of this happening. I mean, we've seen before that the developers aren't afraid to sneak in little Easter egg moments into the story. For example, in the 2.4 storyline, when you're signing up for the Great Aegon, you can literally name your team Wuthering Waves, and the announcer actually calls it out during the event. So, knowing Kuro, I would not be surprised if they threw in a small nod or a playful line like that somewhere in the 2.7 story. The next prediction comes from Zenji4376, who says, Gashulin will show up in the second phase Trust. Now, by second phase, I'm guessing they're referring to the Chi-Wen story, and honestly, I can totally see that happening. We all know that Gashulin is an incredibly important character in the Wuthering Waves story. More importantly, he's deeply connected to another Thenodian, Overthrax. So having Gashulin appear in the Chi-Wen storyline would do two major things. First, it would massively boost interest in Chi-Wen as a character, since he's tied to someone with that much narrative weight, and second, it would just explode the hype around the story itself. So as we wait for version 2.7, this is one of those predictions that I really hope turns out to be true because it would only make the second phase of 2.7 so much more impactful. The next prediction comes from Gaha Gacha, who says Cantarella gets her Holy Maiden powers back. To be honest, as much as I'd like to say this is a possibility, I really don't see Crow doing that. The idea of CRAZIER being the Holy Maiden has been firmly established in the story, and a core part of that lore is Cantarella's sacrifice. The moment she gave up her role and transferred the Holy Maiden's powers and responsibilities to CRAZIER. Reversing that decision would undo so many key elements of the story's foundation, and I just don't think Wuthering Waves would risk tampering with something that central to the narrative. However though, I do see Cantarella playing a a major role in the story. As mentioned before, a huge part of CRAZIER's character is her ability to absorb frequencies, which makes her a perfect host for the Threnodian, and that is exactly why the Threnodian is so obsessed with her. But if CRAZIER doesn't work out, I can absolutely see Cantarella becoming a kind of substitute host. After all, as the former Holy Maiden, she already has that connection to the same kind of energy. So yeah, I can definitely see Cantarella be more relevant in version 2.7 than many people might expect. The next prediction comes from Jonathan Fernando 2217, who says, "It would be a brutal defeat for your heroes. Master Leviathan will have his victory. Come join us in peace everlasting." Now, this is the absolute worst case scenario. Our heroes lose, the Threnodian wins, everything collapses, total defeat. And honestly, that would be awesome, because here's the thing. The idea we all have in our head is that we're definitely going to win. The heroes always win. Nothing is going to stop our victory. But imagine if Wuthering Waves pulls an Avengers Infinity War type twist, where everything just goes wrong and we lose badly. That would be such a bold move. It will set up the next version perfectly, making any comeback feel massive. And to be honest, I'd love to see the game go that route, but since it's still a gacha game, I don't think they'll risk that kind of dark ending. But still, we've seen Wuthering Waves subvert expectations before. I mean, nobody expected Frelova's story to hit as hard as it did, but Crow made it work beautifully. So maybe, just maybe, Jonathan might be onto something here. Maybe Crow is cooking up a storyline where we don't win, or at least not yet. The next one isn't exactly a prediction, it's more of a wish, and it comes from Jab6322, who says, "In all seriousness, I'd like to see how Augusta and Galbarina would interact. I'd be so happy if the latter was really a long-lost childhood friend, Angel." Now let's be real here. Galbarina being Angel is something that the game has pretty much already told us. From her accents to her deep connection with the Tacit Discords, it's all but confirmed. She absolutely is Angel. So then the real question becomes, how would that reunion play out? And in my head, I can only see it going one of two ways. The first possibility is Galbarina doesn't really care much about Augusta. It's not the kind of reunion we're picturing where they run into each other's arms crying. Instead, it might just be this anticlimactic moment, a reunion that feels kind of cold. And honestly, that would make so much sense, because that is how it sometimes works in real life. You can drift away from a friend for so long that when you finally meet again, they feel like a stranger. That happens. The second possibility is what most people expect, the emotional, touching reunion. But personally, I don't really want that, because it feels too expected. And I want Wuthering Waves to keep subverting our expectations in every possible way throughout the entire story. But either way, no matter how the reunion is handled, I think I will be content. Alright, now heading into the last two predictions. The next one comes from Castoon, who says, "Frelova will help/join Team Rover to help fight up against Scar and hold off the Fraxidus." Now, as much as I love to see Frelova join Rover's side, I actually think that this would be a little too predictable, because here's the thing. Right now, Frelova doesn't have any clear incentive to fight this war. In the 2.5 story, her entire focus was simply on making the loss beyond a reality. So unless something happens in 2.7, maybe something the Fraxidus does to threaten the loss beyond, I don't see any reason for her to suddenly switch sides. If Kuro really wants to make Frelova's involvement believable, they need to give her a reason that makes sense, something that fits her character. And that reason can't just be, oh, she found a way or she suddenly wants to do good. No, Frelova has to act out of self-interest. She has to be doing this because it benefits her, not because she's trying to help us. So Frelova teaming up with the Rover against Scar, sure, I can see that happening under the right circumstances. But Frelova going up against all of the Fraxidus, absolutely not. I do not think Kuro would give her that kind of role. That said, who knows? Maybe I could be wrong and the game finds a way to make it all work naturally. But as things stand now, I just don't see that being the direction they take her story. And finally, the last prediction comes from Heroes9889, who says, "Beating Leviathan once and for all, finally, I am tired of this thing." And let's be honest, Rover would not cooperate with Galbarina if she hurts CRAZIER. And honestly, I 1,000,000% agree with everything Heroes says here. Because as I mentioned earlier, the Threnodian has been a constant thorn in our side since the very beginning of the game. From version 2.3 all the way to now, this thing has affected the story in one way or the other. So finally killing it off in 2.7 would feel like a dream come true. At this point, I think Kuro has milked the Threnodian enough. But to be fair, I also believe that this is one of the best recurring enemies I have ever seen in any gacha game. The fact that it keeps showing up, evolving, and forcing our characters to grow makes it genuinely memorable. And then the second part, the idea that the Rover would absolutely not team up with Galbarina if she hurts CRAZIER, is also completely true. And the fact that in the trailer we actually see the Rover team up with Galbarina implies that Galbarina did not kill CRAZIER. But here's the issue. We don't see CRAZIER anywhere in the trailer. She's not in that Avengers Assemble moment. She's not in any shot. So the only possible explanation right now is that CRAZIER might actually be the one we're fighting. She could be the antagonist of the story, or at least one of them. Again, this is just a prediction, but man, it would be so cool to see everyone teaming up to take down one CRAZIER. That would be absolutely amazing. But more than anything, it would really highlight her strength. It would also push the idea that CRAZIER might die at the end of the story arc. Really, I think all all these predictions just show how epic the Renaissita story has been so far. I mean, who would have thought that there'd be so many predictions, this many discussions about a gacha story? Wuthering Waves is doing phenomenal job with the Renaissita arc. Every chapter has built so much intrigue, so much emotional weight, and now the expectations for the 2.7 story are through the roof. But now the floor is yours. What do you think we're going to get in version 2.7? Tell me your predictions. Do you really think Cardathea might die in this story? Or do you think there's something else going on? What do you think about Philova, the Fraxidus, Galbarina, the Rover, and everyone who plays a part in this upcoming war? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.